There is a moment in every early relationship when the feeling arrives before the words are ready. You feel it clearly. It's already there, warm and undeniable, sitting in your chest while you're in the middle of an ordinary conversation. And you know, with complete certainty, that it is too early to say the three words that match it. So most people say nothing. They carry the feeling quietly, hoping the other person can sense it without being told, waiting for some invisible signal that it is finally safe enough to name what's been growing since almost the beginning. But older men tend to do something else entirely, something quieter than silence and more honest than waiting. Something that communicates everything the three words would have communicated without the weight, without the pressure, without the risk of arriving somewhere the other person isn't ready to go yet. What most people don't realize is that "I love you" said too early almost always does the opposite of what it's meant to do. It doesn't draw someone closer. It startles them. It shifts the weight of the entire relationship onto a single moment that neither person was prepared for, and suddenly what was building naturally, organically, without pressure, feels like something that requires an immediate response. Stay with me here, because what older men have learned about timing and language is something most people only understand in retrospect, long after they've said the words too soon and felt the air change in the room. Think about the first time you or someone you know said those three words in a relationship and regretted the timing. Not the feeling, never the feeling, just the timing. The moment the words left the air and you could see in the fraction of a second before any response arrived that the other person wasn't quite there yet, that the words had traveled slightly too far ahead of where things actually were. That specific kind of regret is almost universal, because most people are taught that love is something to be declared rather than demonstrated. Declare it and the relationship will deepen to match the declaration. But it rarely works that way. Relationships don't deepen in response to declarations. They deepen in response to proof, and proof accumulates slowly through small, repeated moments of attention, not through a single, perfectly worded sentence spoken at the right time. This is where things become interesting. An older man, one who has lived through the particular sting of saying too much too soon, or watched a relationship he valued pull back slightly after those three words arrived uninvited, learns a different language. A quieter one, two words that carry most of what "I love you" carries, without the weight that makes someone feel they have to decide something before they're ready. We'll come back to exactly what those two words are. But first, consider what makes those three words so difficult to receive when they arrive early. Imagine this. You're 3 weeks into something that feels genuinely good. The conversations have been easy and honest. There's a warmth between you that neither of you has had to manufacture. And then, in a quiet moment, the other person looks at you and says, "I love you." Notice what happens inside you in that moment, even if you feel something close to it yourself. Even if the feeling is already there, the words trigger something other than pure warmth. There's a sudden awareness of being seen, which is nice, but also of being assessed, of needing to respond, of the relationship suddenly carrying a weight it didn't carry 5 seconds ago. Something that was moving naturally and without pressure has just been given a destination. And that destination requires a decision. The deeper truth is this: "I love you" early in a relationship doesn't just express a feeling, it implicitly asks a question. It says, "I have decided something about you and about us, and now I need to know whether you have decided the same." And that question, whether intended or not, changes the dynamic of everything that follows until it's answered. Now we move deeper, because this is where the two words reveal their real function. The two words are "I remember." On the surface, this phrase looks almost too plain to carry any emotional weight. It sounds like the beginning of a sentence rather than a complete thought. But the way an older man uses it is something different. He says it in the specific, unhurried way that makes clear he has been paying close attention. He says it pointing at the small thing, the offhand detail, the quiet, unremarkable fragment of her that she mentioned once and assumed had evaporated. "I remember you said that place reminded you of somewhere you used to go as a kid. I remember you mentioned that week being the hardest one you'd had in a while. I remember you told me you don't actually like that, even though you never complain about it." Two words, followed by the evidence that someone has been holding the texture of your life in their mind long after the moment passed. This is where things start to land differently than most people expect. What happens next is important. Because the effect of I remember goes somewhere that I love you spoken too early cannot reach. When someone tells you they love you, you have to take it on faith. The feeling they're describing is internal and invisible. You can believe them, or you can wonder in the quieter parts of your mind whether the feeling will hold once the newness fades, once difficulty arrives, once they see the parts of you that are harder to love. But when someone says, I remember, they are not asking you to take anything on faith. They are handing you evidence. They are demonstrating through the specific, unrepeatable detail of something you actually said or felt or carried that your life has been sitting in their awareness in a way that can't be performed. You cannot remember something you did not actually notice in the first place. The remembering is proof of the noticing, and the noticing is proof of care. There is something deeper happening here, and it has to do with the particular kind of safety that early relationships need in order to deepen without pressure. Consider the moment when those two words are spoken well. She isn't being told anything about the man saying them. She isn't being asked to evaluate her own feelings or decide whether she's arrived at the same place yet. She's simply being shown that her small, quiet moments have been kept, that the ordinary fragments of who she is, not the impressive parts, not the things she polished before sharing, but the unfiltered, incidental details of her actual daily life have been held in another person's mind as though they mattered. That is not a small thing to feel. Most people go years without feeling it fully. But before we go there, it's worth sitting with something most people overlook entirely. Think about what I love you and I remember actually prioritize psychologically. I love you is at its core a statement about the speaker. It describes his internal experience. It tells her how he feels. The emotional content of the statement lives inside him, and he is transferring it to her in language, hoping the transfer lands. I remember is the opposite. It is entirely about her. It places her at the center of the moment with no room for him to occupy the same space. It says, in effect, I have been paying such close attention to you that the specifics of your experience have stayed with me without effort, because you were the thing I was interested in, not the impression I was making while you were talking. This inversion, moving from his feelings to her reality, is precisely why I remember produces something closer to intimacy than I love you does at an early stage. Intimacy is not built through declarations. It is built through sustained, specific, attentive interest in the actual person in front of you, including the parts of them they never thought worth highlighting. Now we move to the deepest layer of this, because this is where everything shifts. The deepest truth is this. What I remember communicates is not simply that he has been paying attention. It communicates something rarer and more significant, that her ordinary self, the version that exists between the interesting moments, the version that thinks out loud and trails off mid-sentence and mentions things she immediately assumes the other person has already forgotten, is interesting enough to be retained, not cataloged deliberately. Retain naturally, the way you retain things that matter to you without deciding to remember them. This is what most people are quietly starving for in early relationships and almost never say out loud. Not to be loved in the grand, declarative sense. To be found interesting enough in the quietest and least edited version of themselves to be remembered. And this reframes the entire original question. The question most people start with is, when is it safe to say I love you? But that question assumes love is a declaration that must be timed perfectly to land without disturbing the trajectory of what's building between two people. The better question is this: am I actually paying close enough attention to this person that my care for them shows up in the specific, unrepeatable details of what I've retained? Because if the answer to that question is yes, you don't need to find the right moment to say the 3 words. You are already communicating everything those words carry, through something quieter and more convincing than language that can be said without meaning it. I love you can be said without truly seeing someone. I remember cannot. One is a feeling described, the other is a feeling proven. And proof, especially early on, before trust has had time to build its own foundation, always lands deeper than description. If this opened something for you, there is much more beneath the surface of how small, specific attention communicates what grand declarations often cannot, and what it means to be truly seen by someone before the words for it exist. Stay close. This understanding is only the beginning.